ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Dinozor Gaming, where we learn to be a better player. Today, we're going to be showcasing a game from the finals of our local league. On the left, we have Tarkin Town being piloted by one of our local players who has been playing Tarkin forever. And on the right, we have Yoda Command being piloted by none other than local legend, the winner of the first Montreal Planetary Qualifier. Now both of these players have been playing these decks for a very long time, so we're in for some high caliber gameplay. Now Jump to Lightspeed has been very kind to both of these leaders. Tarkin, of course, getting a bunch of new Imperials to play with, especially in these colors. We have the Devastator, we have the new pilots, and so on the right side in Command, Vigilance, Heroism, we had a lot of smaller ships and new tools for the Yoda to abuse. So let's see what we have in store for us. Now Yoda starts with a C-3PO, an extremely powerful draw engine for Yoda, considering you can manipulate the top of your deck. And Tarkin starts with a very aggressive 3-2 TIE Fighter in space. Now, important to note that the Tarkin is most likely the beatdown in this matchup. Tarkin needs to be able to dish out 30 damage to the Yoda base before Yoda's able to stabilize with all of their restores and sentinels. Now, C-3PO attacks, calls 3. Most of the Yoda deck is most likely going to be 3 costs, at least a solid 15 to 20 cards in there, so that's a fine bet, and C-3PO does hit You're My Only Hope. Plays a Yoda, and then Tarkin answers with a General Veers. Now, General Veers is the cornerstone of the Tarkin deck, buffing up every other Imperial unit with +1/+1. That is definitely what you want to see. And note that Veers is 3/3, which the Yoda player is not able to defeat in a single swing. Most likely will need to use an event or some other way. Besides that, Yoda attacking into Veers is the play, dealing 2 damage, putting it at exact range for C-3PO to kill it. The Tarkin player realizes this, gives an experience to it, putting it at 2 health, forcing the Yoda player to use an event or some other means of defeating it instead of attacking it for free with C-3PO. On top of that, giving it 4 attack is exactly enough to defeat the C-3PO, so the Yoda needs to get rid of it as soon as possible. And looks like we see a perilous position to remove it. Very good play by the Yoda player. In response, looks like we're going to be paying 3 for a Super Laser Technician. C-3PO can definitely dispatch that quite easily. However, doing so would put the Tarkin player at 5 resources, which is the deploy turn for Tarkin. So you probably don't want to enable that for your opponent. Instead, looks like we see a 3 damage to the base from the TIE Fighter, and C-3PO hits base to draw the Village Protector that was put on top with Yoda's skill. The Tarkin player claims initiative, and looks like we are moving on to the 5 resource turn. So of course Tarkin comes out this turn on 5 resources with the Super Laser Technician and the initiative most likely going up to 6. This is going to be a very strong turn for Tarkin, as the turn that Tarkin deploys. Yes, of course, Tarkin alone is only a 2/7, but the longer it stays in play, the more experience it's able to pass out to its own units, making the board extremely sticky and hard to deal with. So as the first action, we'll remove Yoda, and Super Laser Technician goes into the resources, putting Tarkin at 6. Tarkin is then deployed, and in response, it looks like Yoda plays a You're My Only Hope after manipulating the top to get a U-Wing reinforcement. Who needs to ramp when you can just play 7 costs card on turn 4? That is extremely strong play by Yoda. Looks like he digs the top 10 and finds himself a Luke Skywalker. And of course, we did have the Yoda defeated this turn, so this is going to be a -6/-6. Of course, can either hit the Tarkin, putting it at 0-1 in C-3PO range, or can defeat the TIE Fighter to reduce the damage output as much as possible. Of course, doing it to Tarkin puts it at risk of it getting buffed right out of the C-3PO range. So exactly, it looks like Yoda decides to get rid of the TIE Fighter. Tarkin plays a Ruthless Raider, dishing out 2 damage to the base and the unit, and it looks like in this case it's going to be the Luke Skywalker. Now, to note that Luke Skywalker is now at 5 health, making it so if it decides to attack the Tarkin, it'll go down to 3 health, which puts it in Tarkin Town range. That was a very well calculated play by Tarkin. Now, C-3PO hits Tarkin, putting it at 6, right in range of the Luke. And so, realizing that Tarkin is most likely going to be defeated anyways, Tarkin kills C-3PO, buffs up the Ruthless Raider, and that's how the turn is going to end. Now, one thing of note is that this is a very precarious situation for Yoda, because while getting rid of the Tarkin is important, if you do get rid of that first, Ruthless Raider is still going to dish out the 5 damage to you. However, if you do kill the Ruthless Raider with, let's say, Fell the Dragon, that extra 2 damage is going to go on the Luke, putting it in Tarkin Town range. So no matter what you do, one way or another, it looks like your board is in peril. So let's see what Yoda's going to do with the initiative here. It looks like we're paying 3 for blue leader and an extra 2 to ambush ground. Wow, that's one way to get rid of the Tarkin without putting your Luke in danger. So we see that blue leader come in, take the 2 damage. So it's going to be a 5-3. Of course, that is in Tarkin Town range, but at least that way your Luke is safe. However, the Yoda player is pretty much out of resources, only having 1 left. And the Tarkin has 7, and at 7 we see a Darth Vader. Darth Vader coming in and ambushing that Luke, of course taking 6 damage. Well, looks like before the ambush we're going to be taking a look at top 10. However, that is a very, very powerful swing by Tarkin, because not only is that getting rid of the Luke Skywalker, as we mentioned earlier, the blue leader is now in Tarkin range. Tarkin Town range, and so now you've developed your board. You have 3 units in play. Your opponent will have none in play, and on top of that, your Vader survives. Yes, it's only at 1 health, but you are playing versus Command Vigilance. There's not a lot of low or free pings that can dish out that 1 damage. Usually, most of their removal is more expensive in either takedown or perilous position, make an opening, fell the dragon. So leaving something at 1 health is almost the same as having something at 4 or 5 health. And it looks like that's exactly what happens. We see the Tarkin Town, and we have 3 units to none with 9 damage on Yoda's base. It's already looking like an uphill battle for Yoda. However, Yoda does have the initiative, and they are now moving into the 7 resource turn. Yoda is able to deploy this turn, and on deploy, it can defeat a unit. So that is one way for him to win the board back.
A lot of cards in your hand.
Yeah.
Yes, as noted, there are a lot of cards in Yoda's hand. We saw quite a few card draw through both C-3PO and Yoda, and so Yoda is bottlenecked less by cards in hand and more by resources available at the moment. So as long as he is able to stabilize and get rid of the threats on the board, it should be pretty easy to block off your opponent's place. Looks like we see a perilous position to get rid of the Darth Vader. That's a good play, because not only does it save the 5 damage from hitting the base, it also enables you to trigger your Yoda, put something on top of your deck that you can then, of course, discard with the Yoda deploy. We see 5 damage going to the base, 14 damage already on Yoda's base, and in order to prevent further damage, we see a Village Protector come down. That's gonna stop quite a bit of damage, because yes, that 4 damage that would have hit base is instead probably gonna have to go into the shield. There's not much in command aggression that can get through a shield easily, and so that's exactly what we see here. 4 damage wasted just to get rid of a shield. The Yoda player doesn't have much left to do this turn other than use Yoda's skill and then deploy it, so that's what we're gonna see here. Yoda used to draw a card, most likely put something on top to then discard. Now at 8 resources, the Tarkin can... Alright, looks like we're gonna be paying 1 here for either a Stormtrooper or a TIE Fighter. That's right, we're gonna be seeing a TIE Fighter come in. Yes, it's only a 2-1, but it's still a unit that needs to be dealt with. And Yoda flip defeats the Ruthless Raider. On Ruthless Raider defeats the Village Protector. Everything's just blowing up left and right. And for 7, we see a Darth Vader able to ambush for 5 potentially, depending on what is found here. Of course, there are a lot of very good targets in this deck. We have the pilot that's already in play, which you won't want to see because he's unique. We have Sentinels, we have General Veers. And General Veers would be an insane play here, because not only would the Vader instead, oh, there we go, that's exactly what we're going to see. General Veers comes down, Vader now instead of ambushing for 5, ambushes for 6, putting Yoda at 3 health. That means no matter what Yoda attacks here, it would be defeated. Once again, Yoda has found himself in a very precarious position. So instead of attacking, Yoda claims. Now this is a very interesting play, because instead of attacking and defeating something, Yoda claims, meaning so he would still be the one to attack, get the restore, and have a unit defeated. But now, going into a fresh turn, having a unit that was defeated on your side of the board enables one of the strong cards for vigilance, of course, Luke Skywalker, that we saw earlier. So this is just outright better than simply attacking the turn before and having your opponent claim. The action economy pretty much stays the same with that minor advantage. So we see a Restore 2 and Darth Vader defeated. Looks like Tarkin player decides to simply push out as much damage as possible before revealing what their play for this turn is going to be. It doesn't look like there was anything resourced, so the Tarkin player is staying at 8 resources. At 8, of course, we could see anything such as another Devastator, perhaps. Not another, sorry, we can see a Devastator that we haven't seen, that we spoke about earlier as one of the new threats, one of the new big tools that Imperials have gotten. And it looks like Yoda player starts with a U-Wing reinforcement, hoping for some Sentinels or some Restores. We see a Kanan come down, and
If I swing, then you can...
looks like a bit of a discussion here going on whether it was smarter to kill the Vader or the Veers. That is definitely something to consider. Defeating the Vader did save 5 or 6 damage from the base. However, defeating the Veers would have potentially saved another 6 damage due to the +1/+1s. Looks like the U-Wing finds a blue leader, which defeats the TIE Fighter, but due to Veers, blue leader is defeated as well. Yoda finds himself in a very rough spot, already 19 damage on base. Only 11 more needs to happen, and Tarkin has not played anything yet. Using the Tarkin leader ability, you can already push out another 4 with Veers, and God knows what else you can do with 8 resources open, especially considering Yoda doesn't have anything left. We see a Ruthless Raider come in, dealing 2 damage to the base and to Kanan. Only 9 health left on Yoda's base. And Yoda's probably going to claim here. And so for another 2 resources, we're going to see Snowtrooper Lieutenant. Veers dishes out the last 5 damage. Well, not the last 5 damage. Dishes out 5 more damage, putting the base at 4 health. But looks like Yoda says, that's enough. I can't come back from that. Let's move on to the next game. Of course, these players are probably going to spend some time sighting. So while they're doing that, let's go ahead and take a look at some of their deck lists. Here we have the deck list for the Yoda player. And we can see that in the side deck there are 3 Entrenched, 3 Vigilance, another Fel the Dragon, another Rival's Fall, a Radis, and the Chewbacca. And this matchup, of course, the Vigilances could be useful in doing some healing. The Entrenched might be pretty powerful considering there's not much in terms of space, so doing that on the Ruthless Raiders would slow down the Tarkin player quite a bit. Of course, another Fel the Dragon or Rival's Fall wouldn't hurt as well, considering there's a lot of tall units happening in the Tarkin deck. And then finally, let's take a look at the Tarkin deck. Here we are. We see that in the side deck, we have 2 Fang Fighters, we have 2 Sentinels, few Dark Troopers, we have 3 resupplies, and 3 Crate Dragons. That is very heavy. Already we see that there's quite a bit of endgame in this deck, so adding in more ramp and more late game could make it so you can just outvalue the Yoda opponent. Alright, so let's go ahead and see what our players are up to. They are still sighting, so we're going to fast forward here a little bit, jumping into game 2. And here we are. Game 2 has started, and the initiative is with Yoda. You guys already got a sneak peek, but it looks like we're going to be starting turn 1 with Yoda playing a Battlefield Marine. Very strong unit. Tarkin starts once again with a TIE Fighter, and after the claim plays a second TIE Fighter. That's already 4 power on the board. That's crazy. Let's hope that the Yoda player has some kind of space presence, otherwise that's going to dish out so much damage really quickly. So starting off with a 3 damage on base, and Tarkin responds with a simple 2 as well. And for 3, we see a 4-1 ambush, one of the new units in Jump to Lightspeed, but chooses not to ambush. So we see a Super Laser Technician, and the TIE Fighter trades in. Unsure whether that was worth it or not, but hey. Now, Super Laser Technician is only 2 power, can't really defeat that Battlefield Marine right away. However, Tarkin's leader is able to give it an experience, putting it right in range of it. On top of that, we have seen the Snowtrooper Lieutenant. Never mind, Battlefield Marine does hit the base, putting it at 6. And so Tarkin calls the bluff, pays 1 experience, it looks like, pays 1 resource to give that Super Laser Technician an experience. So now, unless it's dealt with in some way, it's going to be able to trade in and put himself to 5 resources and deploy Tarkin. And so for 4, looks like the Yoda player is deciding whether to play a Bright Hope. Maybe deciding if he's going to bounce. All right, that comes in. Bounce would be interesting to prevent the ramp. Looks like no bounce, so instead the Super Laser Technician trades in with the Marine, puts Tarkin at 5. However, that Bright Hope does significantly slow down the space damage coming from Tarkin. Considering that there were 2 TIE Fighters started on turn 1, only 2 damages built to the Yoda base. This is already looking much better than the first game. Alright, so Tarkin comes out, deploys, 4 resources still open. It looks like Yoda claims, and so a pilot comes down as a 4-3. Tarkin attacks base for 2. An experience to be given. If you give it to the TIE Fighter with 3 power and Tarkin time, you can definitely take down the Bright Hope, but then you would have nothing left in space to actually take advantage of the lack of Sentinels. So instead, it looks like ground is given the experience. The pilot is given, turned into 5-4. That's already a pretty big threat, especially considering you've ramped that Yoda is only going to be at 5 resources while you are at 6. The board is already starting to shift in Tarkin's favor. Now Yoda has the initiative here, going into the 5 resource turn. And as the first action, the TIE Fighter is defeated. So now space is completely in Yoda's control. Looks like Tarkin chooses to attack first, always a smart play. Gives another 2 damage to base and buffs up that unit up to a 6-5. Alright, Fell the Dragon is used to remove that from play before taking a massive 6 to base. But now Yoda is pretty much tapped out. Looks like a Ruthless Raider comes down for 6, dealing another 2 to Bright Hope and 2 to base, putting that Bright Hope potentially in Tarkintown range. Yoda player uses Yoda ability, puts something at the bottom, filtering out their hand. Very good effect. And with all tapped out, looks like Tarkin simply claims initiative. Now, of course, Tarkin can use Ruthless Raider to get rid of that Bright Hope, but another play is to force your opponent to defeat that Ruthless Raider. That way, on defeat, that Bright Hope dies anyways. And it looks like that's exactly what's going to happen here. We're going to be doing 2 to base, buffing up the Ruthless Raider. So even if we do see a direct hit or a Fell the Dragon of some kind, that Bright Hope's going to die regardless. So looks like Yoda doesn't take the bait, simply attacks base. And so Tarkin decides to finally use that Tarkin Town, get rid of that Sentinel, open up the path for that 5 damage, hopefully, coming out with the Ruthless Raider. Now the 6 resource turn for Vigilance and Command Heroism is unfortunately a weak point. There's not much that is usually played as the 6 cost. Sometimes we see some Obi-Wans being played, but considering Yoda is not a 6 deploy leader, Obi-Wan does lose a bit of value. So instead we just see a Yoda ability trying to filter out their hand or put something on top. And of course, Ruthless Raider deals out the 5 damage to base, already putting the Yoda player at 15. Half of the damage is already dealt. Now for 3, looks like we see a resupply. Wow, that definitely ramps up the Yoda and puts him at 7. That is Yoda's deployed turn, potentially, considering the top of the deck was already manipulated. Looks like we'll be able to know what's going to be discarded when the Yoda flips. And hopefully whatever he did put on top, we'll be able to defeat that Ruthless Raider and hopefully win the board back for Yoda. Looks like Tarkin is deciding whether to play something or not. And Tarkin passes, waiting for Yoda to make the play. And Yoda plays You're My Only Hope and flips a Fell the Dragon that was put on top. Ruthless Raider is defeated, dealing 2 to base, but at least no units to deal that extra 2 to. Now, Tarkin responds by playing a Vader with nothing to ambush, but still developing the board. And even if you don't have something to ambush into, having 3 units in play is pretty hard to deal with. For Yoda, there's not anything that can defeat all units or deal damage to multiple units in these colors, unfortunately. But that said, Vader is a bit safer considering Yoda no longer knows what's at the top of his deck. Yoda flips anyways, hoping to mill something good. And look at that, it's a home 1. That was a very lucky flip. That Vader goes down. Hopefully that is exactly what that Yoda player needed to come back into the game. Tarkin claims initiative. And Yoda's deciding what to attack. Still gets the restore 2 regardless. So we're going to go back down to 15 health on the base. Yoda hits Tarkin, it looks like. That's right, dealing 4 damage there, restoring. The bases are evening out a little bit more. Looks like the Yoda player does resource up to 8 resources here. Tarkin is still unsure if it's worth it. No resources for the Tarkin side, still stays at 7. Of course, with that Super Laser Technician can easily go up to 8. Looks like we're going to swing onto the base with Tarkin, give an experience to that Super Laser Technician, knowing that Tarkin is most likely going to be defeated regardless. Yoda swings at base instead, restoring 2. And we're looking at 12 damage on Tarkin Town versus 15 on Yoda. The base healths are pretty evened out considering Tarkin Town has 5 less health baseline. The Super Laser dishes out 3 damage to Yoda and then goes into the resources, putting Tarkin at 8. And Yoda answers with a U-Wing reinforcements once more. Now, Luke Skywalker would be pretty devastating here, getting rid of that Tarkin and giving pretty much board advantage to Yoda. Alternatively, you can have 2 smaller Restore or Sentinel units, and oh, that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to be seeing 2 Restore units in Kanan and Yoda. And in response, looks like we're going to pay 8 for Devastator, dishing out 4 damage to Big Yoda. That goes back into the leader slot and not the discard. So yeah, while there are 3 to 4 restore on Yoda's board, that is 9 potential damage on Tarkin's side. And considering we've already seen 2 Felder Dragons used this game, it's going to be very hard to deal with this unless there is a Rival's Fall in hand or that 3rd Felder Dragon. Let's see what Yoda does considering they have the initiative. Okay, resources put down, going to 9 on both ends. And it looks like we're going to be using Kanan to get rid of Tarkin. That's good. That removes 3 damage from the board, 2 from the swing, 1 from the experience. Resupply is milled, restoring 1. Most likely we're gonna see a Devastator hit for 9, putting that base to 23 damage. Only 7 more needed. So unless that Devastator is dealt with, even with the Restore 2 from Yoda, that is a swing for game. Looks like Yoda decides to use the leader ability to either filter his hand or put something on top. And now the Tarkin player can claim, hoping that there's no kill here, to swing for game. Or, I mean, you're at 9. We did see that there's a few Crate Dragons in the sideboard that probably came in. Alternatively, of course, we can just play another Vader, win back the board. We saw them all. Look at that. We have 9 for Crate Dragon. That's 2 huge 9 or 10 attack creatures, and looks like Yoda does not have the answer. That's it. GG. All right. Now we're gonna... I mean, honestly, thank you everybody for watching. That's it for the commentary. We're going to spend a bit of time here looking at the deck lists, of course. And so if you liked it, please feel free to leave a comment below, like, subscribe, all that YouTube shenanigans. Thank you for watching.